All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks for joining me today for the role of policies in securing CUI, best practices for CMMC compliance. Once again, my name is Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar, and I'll be the host of today's session. So during today's session, David Rowe is going to be giving us both a demonstration of Exostar's Policy Pro after I give a presentation about kind of where we are in the current state of CMMC. Now, this free trial is for 2 weeks, and it only takes a couple minutes to go ahead and get started. This will give you a preview of how Policy Pro works, and you can see if it makes sense for you. So before I dive into the formal session, just want to cover a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. Now, that does include questions, but you are going to be muted during today's presentation. Now, a number of people did submit questions prior to today's event when they signed up. I've got those at the end of the presentation, and I'll be covering those. Once I'm done with those, I'll also then go into chat and answer questions that came over that way. While David's doing his portion of the presentation, I'll also answer chats that came in while I was speaking. If for some reason we do have an outage during today's session, just wait for a minute and try to reconnect. If at any time you'd like to speak with someone from Exostar, ask questions from our CMMC experts, etc., you can reach out to us a couple of different ways. You can email us at cmmc-team@exostar.com, or you can come to our website. There's a form there on every page to come in as well and ask questions that way. Now, if one of your questions is, will I be receiving today's presentation or a recording of today's session, the answer to both of those is yes. So as a follow-up to today's session, you'll be receiving a PDF copy of today's presentation. You'll also receive a recording of today's session as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, I'm joined by David Rowe of ISMS Solutions today. He'll be doing the live demonstration. David, you want to take a chance to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. Like Kevin said, my name is David Rowe. I'm the Business Development Manager here at ISMS, and I'll be walking through a demo of the platform.
Great. Thanks, David. So as I mentioned, before I turn it over to David to explain how Policy Pro works and to give a demonstration, I want to cover just a little bit of where we are on the CMMC ruling and when it's going to actually take effect, because it is going to take effect and it's going to be very soon. So what we were waiting for were 2 final rules to be published into the Federal Registry. One of those, 32 CFR, actually was published last year on 12/16/2024. That rule laid out CMMC. It explained what it was, how it would be implemented, what it takes, if you will, and the different documentation and rules around it. The last rule we've been waiting for is 48 CFR, and CFR stands for the Code of Federal Regulations. This is the acquisition rule. So this is what we'll go ahead and put clauses into contracts from the Department of Defense that require compliance with CMMC. Now, that was published in the Federal Registry on September 10th of 2025, and it's scheduled to take effect 60 days later. So it goes into effect November 10th, or I'm sorry, November 10th of 2025. Now, just a recap of kind of what CMMC changes. The major difference from CMMC to what we have today isn't necessarily the compliance requirements. Both of them require you to comply with the same rules. CMMC just breaks those rules into different levels, and based on those different levels, it determines what additional steps need to be taken. So with CMMC, you still have to comply with NIST 800-171 if you receive controlled unclassified information. But in addition to just following those rules, you also have to be certified by that third party that you actually do those things. So that's the major difference. This idea that you're going to have to get a third party to assess what you're doing and agree that you're doing these things correctly. It also defines some terms that people have been using about services that they engage. One of those is a CSP, that's a cloud service provider. Those are, if you will, software solutions that you're utilizing to fulfill a portion of the rules of NIST 800-171. And the external service providers are organizations, service providers, right? Service organizations that you've engaged with to provide you an augmentation service to do something to help you secure controlled unclassified information, meet your level 1 requirements, meet the additional level 3 requirements, etc. So CMMC is broken up into 3 levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Now, the majority of organizations in the defense industrial base are level 1 organizations, 63% of those organizations. Level 1 are organizations that do not receive controlled unclassified information. They only receive federal contract information. And you need to safeguard that information in accordance with 15 requirements. These are laid out in Federal Acquisition Regulation 52204-21. You do these things, you annually self-assess that you're still doing these things, and you affirm that you're doing those things, and you're good. Now, level 2 is where we start to talk about organizations that receive controlled unclassified information as part of their contract fulfillment. For those organizations, there are 110 requirements that you need to meet and comply with. You also need to engage once every 3 years with a C3PA organization, a certified third-party assessment organization, to validate that you're doing those 110 controls. As part of that, they're going to assess your system security plan, your body of evidence, right? What do you do? How do you show that you're doing these 110 controls? They may test your organization people that they're implementing these things correctly, et cetera. That's all part of the assessment process. Now, there are 2 levels of level 2. One of those are going to allow some number of organizations to self-assess, but those are going to be based on a contract by contract basis. So the contracting officer will be the people who determine whether or not this particular contract allows for self-assessment or if it's going to require certification. The organizations themselves don't get to decide that, right? It's going to be on a contract by contract basis. And then obviously level 3, this is a small number of organizations in the DIB, but this is because you're receiving a more classified, if you will, or more sensitive controlled unclassified information. And this puts additional controls around those 110. There are 24 additional controls from NIST 800-172 that you also have to comply with. You also have to receive a once every 3-year certification, but that certification is done by DIBCAC, not a C3PAO. Now, when CMMC gets implemented, so this is after the November 10th of 2025, right? Just like 2 weeks away. It is going to be phased in, right? That first phase, it's expected that level 1 that it's still going to be as is today. So there'll be a 1-year period of self-assessment. That's what we do today because of requirements, and we're going to do that same thing for the next year. Then after that initial implementation 1 year phase, we go to phase 2. That's where you're going to start to see solicitations require that level 2 certification. Then after another year, so in the 3rd year, you'll be required, that's where you'll start to see the level 3 certification be required, and then full implementation after that first 3 years. Now, please keep in mind that the DoD does reserve the right to implement these phases in advance of this plan. So it's all going to be based on kind of the contract and what DoD requires, but this is the planned approach. So if you want to make sure that you can bid on contracts that require CMMC level 2, your target date in your mind should be 11/10 of 2026. All right. Now, with that said, there are things that you may be contractually obligated to do today, and those are in contracts today. These are clauses that appear in DoD contracts. These are the 7012, 7019, and 7020 clauses that you see. These clauses, much like CMMC, require that if you receive controlled unclassified information, you safeguard it in accordance with NIST 800-171. If you've got that 7019 clause, that requires you to do a self-assessment using the NIST 800-171 alpha, that's the assessment guide, and go through and score yourself on your implementation of those 110 controls. You go ahead and score yourself, and your score is going to be a 1, a 3, or a 5, or a -1, -3, -5 if you haven't implemented a particular control. So your score is going to range somewhere between a -203 and 110. And you need to input that score into the DoD SPRS system. This is the Supplier Performance Risk System. And so if you've got those clauses in your contracts, these are your requirements today. Now, when we go to this, the new CMMC world, and you've got that new clause, and it's in if I remember correctly, that clause is going to be 7021. That would be, kind of the CMMC requirement in the DFARS contracts. You'll have to flow that down. You'll still be, that SPRS system is still there. Your score of 110, if you're CMMC level 2, will be in that system, because that's what the DoD will look to utilize when they're accepting bids on contracts and when they're evaluating it. That's what they use it for today. It's what they'll continue to use. Now, your overall cybersecurity score, your risk around that, is one of the values that goes into your overall supplier performance risk. Now, when you look to develop your system security plan, and that's what this is all about. So this is about looking at your organization, determining how CUI comes into our company, how and what touches it and manipulates it, right? What stores, processes, or transmits CUI within my organization, both the people, the processes, and the tools, and how we protect that information while it's in the organization. The best way to determine that is actually look at a CUI data flow across your organization. So if we're fulfilling a contract and we receive information from the DoD or from a prime that we subcontracted to, and they give us CUI, how do we receive that information? Is it being emailed to us? Are we being told to go collect it from an SFTP server? Are we getting a document delivered via mail? Who in our organization gets that information? Where do they store it? What applications or processes do we use to process that information? Who additionally may be part of that? Again, where do we store that information while, all the different people are working on it. And then when the contract ends, how do we get rid of that? That encompasses our data flow. And that then should help us define that overall system security or the system and how we secure it. We then should look to diagram that system. And the reason we're diagramming both the data flow and the system is because when you engage with that C3PAO, they're going to ask you, well, okay, show us your system security plan. And if you haven't really defined that system, then it's going to be all about your entire organization. So in that case, it's kind of up to you to say, okay, our entire organization is involved in this flow. So we need to ensure that everything in our, building, our organization, whatever, is compliant with NIST 800-171 or only that particular scope that's part of that data flow. And that diagram and that data flow is going to define that system. And that's what the certified third-party assessment organization is going to look at to see if this, part of our business is compliant with NIST 800-171. The way you lay out that diagram are as you see here, you've got particular kinds of things and you classify them as either a CUI asset, that's something that stores, processes, or transmits CUI. You can also have security protection assets. These are things, they don't necessarily see the CUI, they don't read it, they don't do anything with it, but it might pass through them. It might be a locked file cabinet that is being that is the protection of the CUI. It may be a firewall or something like that. You may have contractor risk managed assets. Remember, we talked about service providers, those managed service providers or managed security service providers, MSPs, MSSPs that you might utilize. These folks and their systems may be part of your overall scope. You may have contractors and third parties that are part of your organization. They may bring their own technology. And if so, that also can be considered part of it. You may have specialized assets like IoT devices or things like that. All of those things can be part of the scope, even if they may not actually store, process, or transmit CUI, but they should be accounted for and recognized as part of your overall system. And then obviously how you protect the CUI within that is going to define how you assess yourself against those 110 controls. Now, when you build that system security plan, that's when you're going to need that data flow diagram, that network diagram. You should provide a hardware and software inventory. You should gather all of your different policies and procedures around that. And you should map those to those individual 110 controls, right? And those 14 control families. Part of that is building the policies around that. And that's what we help you with our Application Policy Pro that David's going to demonstrate in just a minute. Policy Pro provides you those templates for each of those 14 control families and the individual controls within those families. You can then customize those to fit how you've actually implemented that particular control. You'll then also obviously have to have an implementation statement about what you do around that control, the actual technology that's part of it, the policies and procedures you may have around how you add people to an application, firewall rules, things like that. You'll need some evidence of what you've done to actually implement that. And then you gather all of that to provide to the C3PAO. Now, you may already have some of this because you've done other kinds of compliance or certifications for your organization. So it would behoove you, when you start this process or as you go through this process to gather that additional information from your organization. Now, as I mentioned, it really starts with those overall policies. And what David's going to show you here in just a minute, as I mentioned, is Policy Pro. And as I said, this is going to provide you those templates for each of those 14 control families, allow you to customize those to fit your organization, then allow you to run those policies that you've customized through an AI engine to give you a score and give you indications of things you might need to do to improve it, things you may need to do to actually, satisfy a particular control. Now, as I mentioned, if you have controls from other things you've done, if you've written policies for, say, ISO standards that you've done, if you've got in place policies around bring your own devices or things like that, those are all things that you may already have. You can put those into the policy engine in Policy Pro, run those through and get a score and feedback on what you might want to do to adjust that to fit your particular organization into kind of the specific NIST 800-171 control. So with that, let me go ahead and turn it over to David to show you how this actually works. And as I mentioned, while David does this, I'm going to look at chat and I'll be answering questions as they come over that. David, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay, so this is going to be a demo of Policy Pro, which is a SaaS-based application designed to help you and your organization get compliant around the various requirements that Kevin just mentioned, including the NIST 800-171, as well as CMMC 2.0. Regardless of where your organization is in your cybersecurity journey, whether you're just getting started, and maybe you don't have any of those policies or procedures that Kevin had mentioned, or maybe you're further along and you already have all of your policies in place, regardless of where you are through that process, the platform will be able to help assist you out through that journey. We'll start off using our policy building tool, and this is really the first step in that process to make sure that you're getting ready for CMMC 2.0, whether that's level 1 or level 2. In today's demo, though, we'll be walking through an example of level 2. The first time through on the platform, you'll receive this pop-up here, which is a brief explanation of what policies are, as well as some of the other documents you should have if you want to be cyber secure and you want to be compliant with both NIST as well as CMMC. Some of those documents include the gap assessment, risk register, the POAM, which is those plan of actions and milestones, as well as your SSP, your system security plan. If you don't have those documents, we do provide templates to those, as well as a companion product called Certification Assistant that can help automate some of that process of generating both the POAM as well as the SSP. And Kevin will talk about that a little bit later after the demo as well. Once you're ready to begin, once you've closed out of this pop-up here, you can select which domain you want to begin with, starting from access control all the way down to system and information integrity. Once you've selected a policy domain, it'll take you to the prepare, gather, and consult page. This is everything you're going to need to prepare prior to even getting started with the policies themselves. For example, it could include things like gathering your organization's documents, records, and other related materials to these various access control topics. Additionally, who you may want to consult with, whether they are internal or external stakeholders. Some examples of people that might be involved as you're creating an access control policy will include the network administrator, head of IT, or CISO, and then any sort of outside contractor if applicable to your organization. So those include those external service providers, MSPs, MSSPs, IT consultants, etc. Once you're ready to begin, you'll click on this Get Ready Started button on the bottom here. And that's going to take you to our policy template. All of our policy templates are broken out into a couple different sections. We've got the header, which includes your organization name, the department or departments this policy falls under, the issue date for when you finalized, approved by, and the tracking number. The tracking number can be used in a number of ways. However, most people use it to keep track of the version number of your policy. So as you work on revisions and updates, you'll update that tracking number accordingly. The other sections include the purpose, the scope, and the individual practices. So this is where the 110 practices come into place, and you'll want to work on each practice individually. And we make that simpler for you by breaking out each practice into its own individual section. So there's a couple key pieces of information here that you want to take a look at. The first is going to be the practice number. In this case, it's access control 3.1.1. Next to that is the practice description, limiting information system access to authorized users. And then finally, underneath that, you're going to have the guidelines. The guidelines will help you understand what sort of information is typically included in that section, as well as kind of in plain English, explain what that particular practice is about. Once you're ready to begin on editing the policies, you'll click on this pencil icon here located to the right-hand corner, and that's going to bring up our policy template for 3.1.1. And we can see that this policy is going to be about our organization's account creation, work from home, and bring your own device policy. A couple notes as you're working through these policy templates. One, ensure you're reading through the entirety of the template. You want to ensure that what's written here really reflects what your organization has implemented for this particular practice, as well, or if you haven't implemented it, what your plan is in the future to implement based off your policies. Additionally, there are certain sections you want to pay particular attention to as you're working on these documents, and we'll walk through an example here together. So in the first paragraph, it talks about all account creations will be submitted by the requesting department manager to the IT support email address for completion using the account request ticketing system or other process. So there, you'll see brackets or parentheses where you want to customize it to fit what it is your organization has actually implemented. So if you are utilizing a ticketing system to handle those account creation requests, that's what you want to fill in that information there. Otherwise, if you aren't utilizing a ticketing system, maybe it's a simple email, then you want to put whatever process it is you are to properly handle those account creation requests. You can also add comments and mentions. You can tag other users. So again, as part of that preparation phase, you should have identified the kind of key stakeholders that will be involved in this policy process. And so you can add them to the platform and be able to collaborate effectively together on these policies. Once you've made any changes you wish to make, you'll save those changes, and that's going to timestamp it as well as who the user was that last made the change. Additionally, any changes will show up here in the version history. So as you work on revisions and updates to your policies, you'll be able to keep track of all of that through the version history. You can go back to a previous version as well. If you've made a change that you want to revert, you can do that as well through the version history. And this is a great way to show evidence that you are periodically reviewing and periodically updating your policies. Once you've gone through this process of editing all of the templates for each of the individual sections, including the purpose, scope, and the practices, you'll then click on this export button on the bottom here, and that's going to do a couple things. It's going to combine all of those things I mentioned previously, so the header, the purpose, the scope, and all of the individual practices into a single access control document that you can then save locally to your drive. So you'll have both a copy of the policies in the cloud as well as locally, and then you'll have that final kind of Word document of your policies. And it's also an important step prior to the next feature of the platform, which is going to be policy assessment. This page right here is just showing me that I haven't actually gone into these other sections. So this is another good way to see what sections you're missing in your policy documents. Moving on to policy assessment, this is where you're going to come to analyze and assess your documentation, gauge how your policies are doing in relation to CMMC, and show you what sort of gaps might be existing in your documentation. As I mentioned before in earlier on in the demo, regardless of where you are, so maybe your organization already has existing policies, you don't have to go into Policy Builder and build policies from scratch. You can simply upload any existing documentation up into the platform. And there's a couple different types of documents you can upload. So whether that's an existing access control document that you've created specifically for CMMC, or maybe you don't have, let's say, a specific access control document, but you do know that you've done other standards in the past that are similar to CMMC, and you just want to benchmark and gauge exactly where you are in relation to that. So you can upload, let's say, documents you've created for ISO 27001. You can upload multiple documents as well. So maybe you don't have a bulk access control policy, but you might have something like an acceptable use policy or an account creation policy. So you'll be able to upload as many documents as necessary that are relevant to the domain type that you're uploading into. Once you've uploaded that document, pretty quickly you'll receive some various metrics and scores around that documentation. You're going to click on this detailed scorecard here to bring up this pop-up, and we assess your document in a couple of different ways, both at a high level as well as a granular level. At the high level, the overall assessment for this particular document is that it appears relevant in size, scope, and organizational customization. The overall assessment is comprised of 3 different key metrics. The relevance, which is how many key terms and phrases are included in your document. The higher that is, the higher the relevance and therefore overall assessment will be. The model similarity compares the policy you've uploaded to our model documents, and we do that for 2 reasons. One, to ensure it's been appropriately customized to fit your organization and your organization's implementations, as well as ensuring it's covering everything it needs to cover. Finally, the word count is simply to ensure it's long enough so that we have enough context surrounding those key terms to accurately assess your documentation. If you see that word count as too low, chances are the overall assessment and overall score might not necessarily be an accurate reflection of how your policy is doing. In terms of the overall score, here you can see the policy I've uploaded scored 70.3%. Our overall scoring is not like an academic score, meaning 90% is an A, 80% is a B. Our overall scoring is a relevance scoring system, meaning anything above a 50% shows a relevant document, but I'll show you how you can use the overall score along with the other metrics to gauge how your policies are currently doing, as well as how your policies are improving over time as well. So that's everything at the high level, but we also provide some granular feedback as well in terms of what is it you're exactly missing in your document and how you can improve it. And we do that through our key elements not included, or KENI for short. And we have 2 different types of KENIs. We got the control KENIs as well as general policy KENIs. My first example of a control KENI is going to be CUI non-public information. That is that key term or phrase that's missing in my document that I should be looking to incorporate. And we can see some additional information underneath that key term. which is the actual practice that that control Kenny is associated with. In this case, it's 3.1.22, and we provide the discussion requirements, which is directly from CMMC itself. So you don't have to flip back and forth between the platform and the standards to figure out exactly what that particular practice is talking about. The documents for examination are going to be other sorts of documents, records, and or materials that your organization might already have that can help you address that control Kenny when you're working on revising your document. So some examples of those might be procedures, it might be records, training materials, system audit logs, basically anything relevant to that particular control Kenny. Additionally, the documents for examination can be a good list to use to see how you can show evidence or proof that you have actually implemented it. So once you've incorporated it into your policy, once you've implemented it, you want to make sure to be able to show proof that that you are actually doing those activities you stated in your policies. The general policy Kenny terms are very similar in the sense that there are also key terms and phrases that are missing in my document. However, you'll notice there's no collapse all, expand all button with the additional information. And the reason for that is these are not tied to a specific practice or control like the ones above. They're more generic to the policy domain you've uploaded into, in this case, an access control policy. You can also export all of these results into a PDF. So if you just want to save it locally or share it with others who aren't on the platform, you'll be able to share the results of your policies via the export. One last feature here in policy assessment is this management approval. So I'll go ahead and click this management approved button here, and we can discuss it further in the dashboard. The dashboard is where you'll come to see all your progress and work throughout the platform, whether you're creating policies in Policy Builder or assessing policies in Policy Assessment. All of that work is going to be shown here in the dashboard. Additionally, you can keep track of what your most up-to-date policy is through the management approval feature, as well as ensure that whoever is in charge of your CMMC program it has signed off on your policies as well. So you want to make sure that someone is affirming that your documentation is um, that your policy is what's going to be followed for CMMC in your organization. And you can show evidence that you are actually doing that through this management approval feature here. It'll track who the user was, when they last approved it, and any other previously management approved documents. So you can show that periodic revisions and periodic updates for your policies as well through the management approval feature in the dashboard. The process will be to incorporate those Kennys into your documents, and as you do, you'll notice that the overall score, as well as the Kennys will go down, or sorry, the Kennys will go down as you incorporate them, and the overall assessment will start to go up as you incorporate those Kennys into your documentation. So you'll see again, it doesn't need to be a specific number as long as it's above a 50%. Really, what you want to see in your overall score is just trending upwards, not necessarily a specific score. The more important number to focus on are going to be those Kennys. Not necessarily do you need it to be 0 either. There are times where you might use an acceptable words that isn't necessarily captured by the Kennys. And in certain small cases, you may have a not applicable control, and so you'll obviously be missing Kennys because of that. Lastly is our reference library, which is where you can come to if you need some additional information and guidance as you're working on your documentation. Um, we've taken various resources and links across the web, mostly directly from the NIST Institute, but it's a great way to get the most relevant and up-to-date information on a particular topic. So just sticking with the access control example here, maybe you received a CUI related to VPNs and you're unsure how to address VPNs within your policies. You can come to the reference library and select the appropriate link. It's just a simpler way to get the information you need. Everything in today's demo was done for level 2. However, we also have level 1 available on the platform as well. So if you select the level 1 button here on the left-hand corner, that's going to switch the policy domains to these 6 different policy domains and the 15 practices associated with level 1. And let's say your organization believes it should be a level 1, so you're working on the level 1. And then you realize maybe you actually do need to be level 2, you can always swap to the level 2 and work on the remaining 110 controls that are associated with level 2. And that's going to be a great way to get started. Hopefully this has been a helpful overview about how to utilize Policy Pro in your organization to quickly and effectively build out those policies, which is an integral part of actually being CMMC compliant. Because without that documentation, an auditor is not going to be able to actually audit you because they will not know what it is your organization is supposed to be doing, right? That's really what your policies are. It's stating how your organization is going to implement those security controls to meet each assessment objective. That's part of that CMMC assessment guidelines. Kevin is going to talk about a couple more things, so I'll turn the screen over to him. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David. Get back here. All right, everybody. So I did answer some questions as they came in. So hopefully everyone saw those, and I've got those that were submitted by others as well. As David mentioned, Policy Pro is part of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite. This group of applications, so there are 3 SaaS applications and a services engagement. These 3 applications, we just talked about Policy Pro, help you get prepared and available to deliver on that CMMC certification. Certification Assistant is the companion to Policy Pro. This is the application that allows you to manage your overall CMMC program. You can take the policies that you've created in Policy Pro, put those into Certification Assistant as part of that evidence as you build that SSP. Because what Certification Assistant does is, the output of Certification Assistant is that system security plan. So it would include those policies that you built in Policy Pro. It would be the implementation statements you build around each of the individual controls, because that's what Certification Assistant does. It basically takes you through each of the individual controls, allows you to put in those implementation statements, the evidence of what you've done to enforce that particular control, what you do around that control, allows you to put in that you periodically review that, etc. So it allows you to manage that overall CMMC program. Its output is that SSP and that SPRS score, so you know when you're ready to engage with that certified third party, and it provides you again that system security plan, an evidence list, etc., to give that to that C3PA organization when they're ready to come in and do the assessment. Now, if one of the things you're looking to do is create an enclave for your controlled unclassified information, that's Exostar's managed Microsoft 365. This is an enclave up in Microsoft's Azure GCC High, built on top of Teams, with an Exostar application embedded within it that delivers 85 of those 110 controls while working there within the enclave. Then Exostar has a number of partners that can deliver any kind of CMMC type of assessment you're ready to do. It could be, I just want to kind of find out where I'm at, and that would be what we typically call a gap assessment. We have partners that can do mock assessments. We have partners that can help you implement particular controls you're not really ready to do yourself, or you need some help in implementing. And then we also have partners who are C3PAO organizations that can help you get across that final finish line. Now, as I mentioned, we received a number of questions, so I'll cover those next. So first, is there a stated time when every federal contract subcontractors must have either CMMC level 2 or at least CMMC level 1, irrespective of what the contract says? So as I mentioned in my first part of this presentation, November 10th of 2026 would be when phase 2 of the implementation starts. So that's when you'll start to see the requirement for CMMC level 2 third-party assessments be in contracts. That's when CMMC level 1, the self-attestations, et cetera, will also appear in contracts. So that's when they'll be contractually required for contracts. Well, everyone that deals with contracts need this, even if most don't apply to the type of business you operate. So again, it's going to be a contractual obligation, just like you have, DFARS clauses today in the contracts you sign with the Department of Defense, or contracts that you sign as a subcontractor because they've flowed down to you. Now, those are the obligations you've agreed to when you sign that contract. So yes, it will be a contractual obligation you have. And what you'll start to see, and you're probably already seen it today, is if you're a subcontractor, those organizations that you're contracting with will flow down these requirements to you, and they're going to ask you very explicitly, hey, are you CMMC certified? And if you say, yes, I am, they're going to ask for proof of that. And that proof will typically be, the UID of your score in the SPRS system. And they may even go so far as to ask you to screenshot that score and that certification in SPRS and provide that to them, because they've got to have that proof as part of their overall contractual obligation to the Department of Defense. So that kind of goes what the 3 is as well, right? So we're looking for flow down requirements and help with the vetting of our sub-tier suppliers. Now, when I did some work on this just last week, I actually read CFR 48 and the comments that were associated with that. And, a lot of those questions were around, well, how do I vet my subcontractors that they're CMMC certified? And the simple answer is that you're going to have to ask them. You're going to have to get that proof from them that they are compliant. And the way they ask you to show that proof is to get that SPRS information from your subcontractors and provide that as part of your overall bid. And, part of your overall bid is typically, hey, these are the subcontractors we use, and this is the proof that they have the necessary compliance requirements. So number 4, I thought level 1 required a response to the 117 questions. Where do we find the 15 questions for level 1? I'm not quite sure where the 117 question came from in this question. But I often hear some confusion about level 1. And the confusion is often that people talk about having 17 controls. But when you read the slides from the Department of Defense about CMMC level 1, it says 15 requirements. Both of these things are true. And I actually found it. So I went to the acquisition.gov site and I found the requirement. So as you can see, these are the 15 level 1 requirements. Now, if you map these 15 requirements to NIST 800-171 controls, it actually breaks out to 17. And the reason for that is when you look at like number 8 here, limit physical access to organizational information systems. Oh, I'm sorry, no, that's not the right one. It is, sorry about that. I thought I had it marked correctly. Oh, here we go. Number 9, right? Number 9 has actually multiple requirements. Escort visitors and monitor visitor activity, maintain audit logs of physical access, and control and manage physical access devices. So a number of these 15 requirements have multiple controls in them if you map them to NIST 800-171. So that's why you see a difference between 15 requirements versus 17 controls. So it's that kind of thing that why you get this kind of mix up. Okay. So number 5, what actually policies do we have to have? Do we need a policy that by name matches each control family? So you need to have a policy in place for each of the individual control families. So that would be 14 policies. Now, it would help you to name them and how they map to those. And the reason for that is just simply to help your assessor, right? Because when that third-party assessor comes on site, if you just hand them like a stack of documents and say, hey, figure it out, they're going to have difficulty doing that. And so you may not get credit for having something in place. You'll typically want to make sure you have policies, procedures, implementation statements, etc., for each of the control families and each of the individual controls, and that you have them labeled very clearly for that. And again, it's mainly for that third-party assessment organization. The easier you make it on the assessor, the easier it's going to be to pass the assessment and make sure that you get credit for everything that you've done. All right, so as I mentioned a couple times in questions that came over chat, you will be receiving a copy of today's presentation and a link to today's recording. We've got a couple more questions that were submitted, but I also we'll also be providing these additional slides with this additional, helpful information as well. So the final questions that came in are these final 4. So for number 6, for organizations who work with the primes, how likely is it that they need a self-assessment versus a full C3PO certification on level 2? Now, again, this is going to be on a contract by contract basis. The contracting officer from DoD gets to determine whether or not a contract is going to allow a self-assessment or that C3PAO. So people won't know until the actual contract is put out or the proposal is put out what the requirements are going to be. So that's going to determine, and like I said, the contracting officer gets to determine that. You don't get to say, well, for this contract, can I just submit this? It's going to be pretty clear in the contract what certification levels required for that particular contract. So number 7, how do I determine what level CMMC I should have? And how do I know what CMMC level my organization is? So the best way to, I think, to find out, kind of what you're going to need is take a look at your current contracts. If you have that 7012 or 7019 clause, that typically represents that your contracts today may provide you controlled unclassified information, or you may receive controlled unclassified information in accordance with that contract. Because those clauses are just that. They're right. Like if you receive, if you're part of this contract, you may receive CUI, and if you receive CUI, you must protect it in accordance with this. So the best way to determine what level you might be is to look at your current contracts. So number 8, this came in. So our IT department is recommending extremely stringent controls that don't align with what is needed for our users. From everything we have read, such stringent controls are not required. Do you have recommendations on how to approach this matter to better allow our end users to do their job while giving our IT confidence in our policies? You know, I don't have a great answer for this. Other than that, this is the constant struggle between, security and ease of use. And so, CMMC and NIST 800-171 are not particularly prescriptive in their in their controls, right? They don't tell you how you must implement a particular control. They just say you must do these things. How you do that is kind of up to you. And obviously, since many of us use electronic systems, a lot of that, falls on IT to implement this. So I don't have a great answer to tell you to recommend, how you can better argue this with your IT organization. At the end of the day, every organization struggles with this, and there is always that push and pull between ease of use versus security. So number 9, how can we know if FCI will affect future bids? How will it be called out to subcontractors to ensure that we are not intaking material before we are certified to level 1? So just as we talked about the requirement to ensure that all subcontractors adhere to level 2, right? And that you're going to need to ask them their SPURS score, maybe get a screenshot of their entry into the SPURS system as proof that they've done that. That same kind of requirement is also there for level 1, right? There is a place in the SPURS system to input whether or not you meet level 1. And that may very well also be a requirement of subcontractors for those contracts as well. So they may ask you for that same information around level 1 because they're going to need to meet those same requirements and flow down those same requirements to you. Okay, everybody, I want to thank you all for joining today. I want to thank everybody for your time and attention. And everyone have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much.